I am an analyst on the data science team at MailChimp. I work with an incredibly talented and diverse group of researchers. And we all have different methodologies, but our mission really is very simple. And it's to try and understand what people are doing in MailChimp. So what types of features are people using? Where are they running into problems? Where are they hitting roadblocks? Where do we need to improve features for them? And are there existing gaps in the feature set such that we need to build new tools for our users? So really, ultimately, we're just about improving the experience for everyone who comes into contact with MailChimp. So MailChimp, is anyone here familiar with MailChimp or use MailChimp? That's awesome, that's like almost everybody. So MailChimp is an ESP, an email service provider for growing businesses. Our features and integrations allow people to send marketing emails, automated messages, targeted campaigns. And we have a variety of types of users, right? So there's a wide array of uses for MailChimp. But one of the most common, or probably one of the things that you hear about the most, is that of a small business owner. So let's say I'm a small business owner, I've opened up a coffee shop, and I want to get in touch with my customers and tell them when I have a new coffee blend available. Maybe I want to send them a coupon for a free drink on their birthday. So I'm trying to stay in touch, but really what I'm doing is trying to keep these folks engaged, and I'm trying to drive conversions. So I want to make money off this email. I want people to come into my store. I want them to order from my site. I want to do something that is monetizing this email. So this is a really common type of MailChimp user. On the flip side, we have a lot of nonprofits who use us as well. So museums, mission groups, charities, PTAs, lots of different types of use cases. But these are folks who are using MailChimp just to stay in touch. So they're sending out a newsletter. They're not trying to make money. They're just sending out updates. So even right here in just this dichotomy that I've presented, you can see a lot of variation in the types of users, right? Well, we have 9 million of them. So no two accounts look the same. There's a lot of variation, and there's a lot of room for difference, which gets really interesting, but also presents some really hard problems. Those 9 million users sent 840 million emails last Thursday. That accounted for 1% of all of the emails sent in the world last Thursday. So for each of those emails, there's not just an email attached, there's a lot of extra data as well. So you have this campaign, and so in this email I've got an image, I've got some text, some links, and that's cool, but I also have a lot of metadata. So I have the recipient information, I have sender information, timestamp information, anything about the template that's included in there. So this is a lot of information just for one campaign, but think about that on the scale of 840 million of these in 24 hours, right? So I'm sharing this to explain kind of the scale of data we're working with. It's not so much to like brag about our numbers or talk about what we're doing, but it's just to communicate the fact that this is a lot of information to sift through. And also to impress upon you the point that more data is not always better. If you have zero data, you're starting from nothing, yeah, absolutely, get more data. But there does come a point of diminishing returns with this, right? Like, once you get into this scale, like, how do you know what's important about that? How do you know what to look at? How do you know where to go? Like, what parts of this campaign are important and what parts are like, not so interesting to look at? So this is what my team deals with. And the MailChimp data science team is structured a little differently than many data science teams. We do have a group of quantitative researchers like myself. So we typically are running queries against databases. We are writing code to analyze large data sets. Sometimes we'll build statistical models to help understand more about what's going on in the app. So all of these tools are really excellent at helping us understand what users are doing in the app. Okay? So what does a user do after they log in? What features are users accessing? What things are they not using at all? So you get a really clear picture of account activity here. On the other side, we have a really talented group of qualitative researchers. So I really think of these folks as kind of our eyes and ears out on the ground. They'll go out, they'll visit customers all around the world, and they'll interview them. So they'll sit down with them and have a conversation about how they use MailChimp. So tell me about it. Where are you running into issues? Can you show me what your workflow looks like? So this is really helpful for us because we get that context of what else is going on behind that account data. But not only are we getting how they use MailChimp, we're also able to understand more about how MailChimp fits into the software ecosystem the small business or customer is using. Even a step further, so once you start to understand that, you can look at the actual physical environment someone's working in. And if you think about it, somebody who is at a small business, they're wearing like 3 hats, trying to do 10 things, and they're working on a 10-year-old gateway computer, their MailChimp use is going to look a lot different, or their experience with MailChimp is going to look a lot different than some hotshot email marketer who works at an agency that's up and coming, and that is their sole job. So the qualitative research really adds so much color and value to anything we could look at. We also do this through surveys. So surveys are a really cost-effective way to get the voice of the user. Obviously, interviews are ideal because you want that connection. But surveys we found are also incredibly helpful in getting some information in the user's own words. So these types of methodologies are all really wonderful at answering the why. And I want to be clear that these two like groups, they're not, I don't mean for them to look like they're siloed. We are in constant conversation with one another. And I don't mean this necessarily in a formal sense either. I mean, we're having coffee and I'm going, hey, I noticed this really weird thing. Or someone will say to me, I heard this thing in like 3 interviews I did last week. And so that's how it starts. So this only works if you're keeping the conversation open. And this is what you get. So a lot of people will tell you, or there's this like, I don't even know what to call it, but like this common thought that like, one of these is better than the other. Qualitative is better, quantitative is better. And again, anyone who says that is absolutely incorrect. They're out of their minds because these two things are really, really powerful together. And that's how they're best used because they complement each other so well. And once you get these two things working together, you get that full picture of what your users are really doing and why they're doing it. If you want to distill this down even further, you can think about it this way. The what and the why, and you get the full picture. You start to understand motivations. And that why is so elusive. Understanding what's going on is one piece of the puzzle, but when you understand why, you start to get really good at understanding what your users are doing, and then you're able to like get out in front of it a little bit and go, they're doing this because they're running into this problem. What can we do? What can we anticipate is going to happen? So let's go back to this like giant sea of 840 million emails a day thing. Like, this is really scary. This is a lot of information. What do you do with it? Like, where do you even start, right? How do you figure out what's important and what is just totally like noise in that signal? Because what you really want to do is distill this down into like a friendly swimming pool. You're not going to drown. It's not stormy. It's not scary. It's very accessible. So to illustrate how we did this, and also to give you some ideas about how you can do it in your own work, I know there are a couple of you here who are researchers, I want to share a case study with you. We've outgrown MailChimp. So about 2 years ago, I'd say, we started hearing this a lot in customer interviews. A lot of growing businesses felt like MailChimp was not a solution for them anymore because it was too easy to use. It wasn't really an enterprise product. It wasn't powerful. It's great for starting out, but now I need to graduate to something that's more professional. And we at MailChimp, we all knew, MailChimp's powerful. Like, we knew what our product could do. So we realized there was something missing here, right? So these customers are feeling like MailChimp isn't for them anymore. Well, what do they need? This is a very abstract question, right? Like, we're used to working for or with data that's existing. It exists in an app. Like, we're used to researching MailChimp itself. And that's, I don't want to say it's easy to do, but it's a more concrete set of questions, right? Like, what are people doing in XYZ? How are people using this? Those are questions that are pretty easily answered, relatively speaking. So this was new territory for us. This was a little scary because we'd never tackled anything like this. And this is sort of the approach we took. So far better an approximate answer to the right question than an exact answer to the wrong question. And this is a quote from John Tukey. He is a famous statistician from the early part of the 20th century. Also, for known for other things. He's also known as being the father of the box plot. Interesting information today you learned. So this was a tough thing to wrap our heads around, because you always want the exact thing. So you always want to get that perfect information, but it doesn't exist. Perfect data isn't a thing. Like, I think anyone who ever touches data ever knows that this is not a thing. So we realized that we were going to have to get very comfortable with sort of like fuzzy lines and sort of get comfortable being creative in the ways we were going to answer these questions. So this was sort of our like philosophy as we went forward. So, all right, let's do this thing. Let's answer the question. So we started by trying to develop some sort of customer segmentation. Okay, well, why? Well, this goes back to the need to understand motivation. If you can figure out who you're building for, like I said, you can start to get out in front of what they're doing and figure out what they're going to need in the future. So you start to understand kind of the life cycle that they're going through, and you can start to sort of predict what they're going to need next. And this was a very informal sense. I think people talk about customer segmentation in like this very formal, stuffy business sense. And I'm just saying, like, we were like, hey, we need to figure out like the groups these customers are in. It wasn't something super formal or anything like that. But that said, where did we get the data to do this? We turned to surveys for this. So a couple of the ones that we used an annual survey. So this is our survey we send out every year. It goes to a representative sample of MailChimp customers, free, paid, all across the world, across industries. And it's just general questions about how people use MailChimp. We also went through our new user survey, or onboarding survey. And this is sent quarterly to a group of customers or users who've had an account that's less than 30 days old, or they've opened their account in the past 30 days. And really we're asking them things like, what features brought you here? What made you decide to choose MailChimp? What history do you have using other email service providers, so that we can get an idea of like what kind of context people have for using this product. We also used our website feedback form. It's just a small form on the site. Like, you see these all the time, right? And there's a wide range of feedback that comes through this, and sometimes you get some really good stuff out of there. We also went through customer interview data. So anytime our qualitative team goes out and conducts interviews, they'll come back and they'll write up reports and send out notes so that we can refer back to them. So in instances like this. So we started going back through those. And one final data source that we started with was our customer exit survey. So this is something that we ask users to fill out anytime they close their account. And it's really short. We try not to be obnoxious about it. It's just, hey, why are you leaving? Here's a list of reasons. Is there anything else you want to tell us? So it's really short. But this is a super, super, super valuable survey for reasons I'll get into in a moment. But I just want to point out that these things here, like, so all of these surveys and these feedback forms, these are things that you can do right now. If you're looking for ways to get more data and to understand more about the voice of your customer, this is stuff you can set up. Like, go to SurveyMonkey, go to SurveyGizmo, and you can get started with this immediately. It's a great place to start. It's not as resource intensive as doing customer interviews, but you're still getting that voice of the user. Okay, so we started doing customer segmentation. We analyzed survey responses from 20,000 users, and that took a long time. There were several of us working on this at the time. And we categorized all of their feedback by feature. And each feature became an early version of a customer segment. And so up here you can see that I've got advanced reporting and A/B testing as the two segments. There were several other ones, but these are the ones I want to talk about today. So what did this look like? So anytime someone made a comment about wanting more advanced reporting tools, so maybe they wanted to be able to export differently, or they wanted to segment their reports differently, we'd tag it with reporting. Same thing for A/B testing. If someone said something like, well, I'd really like to test more things, or I'd like to do this, we would tag that. And this is just an idea of what this looks like. So again, this is not something that takes advanced tools. This is something you can do right now. This is a spreadsheet, right? So each row is a user. We have some account details in there that we pulled from our database. So we've got their list size, their company size, some other account descriptive information. And then we join all of that up with their survey responses. So we can look at this full picture, right? We can see what they're doing in their account, and then we can see what they told us. So one question we found that's particularly useful is at the end of every survey, we'll include this question: is there anything else you want to tell us? And we find that this is super, super interesting because people will use that as a forum to talk about like some complex problems they're having, or maybe there's an issue they've encountered with the app and they're like, this is weird, I want to tell you guys about this, I don't know if it's a bug, but I want you to know that it's not working the way I expect it to. So that's something else I would suggest. That's always good. But you can see that, so anything that was mentioned about like cross-segment reporting or an easier way to share reports, comparisons, we tagged all that with reporting. And so we landed here. We came up with this advanced reporting customer segment. So this combined survey data with that account data out of our database, and we got this really good picture, this really robust picture of who was going to use an advanced reporting feature. We started to look at things like average and median list size, and we could see the common industries and the account information. And then we started to see some really interesting stuff here with account activity. We noticed that these users typically had like twice the number of integrations connected to their MailChimp account than like an average MailChimp user. So you start to see right away like there's a little bit of differentiation. So we're really excited because like, okay, I think we're on the right track. Like this feels really good. This brings me to this point of data saturation. So this happens when you start to see the same feedback over and over. And it's essentially when adding more data to your set of data isn't going to give you new insight. You're just going to keep hearing the same things over and over. And that's what happened to us when we were doing the reporting research. We started to hear the same sorts of feedback repeatedly, which actually was pretty helpful because we could get an idea for how popular a certain request was, right? So if we heard like cross-segment reporting 20 times out of 30, we would know that we were doing pretty well. Like this is a thing that people really want. So this was something that we also used to help us figure out like, how are we doing on this? How, kind of like a benchmark almost. So we felt good about where we landed. Then we moved on to A/B testing. Unfortunately, out of all of those 20,000 users that we surveyed and looked at, I think maybe 1% of the feedback was about A/B testing. And actually, that is being really generous. I know it was less than 1%. So we had like next to no data on this at all. Again, going back to the saturation thing, this didn't happen with A/B testing information. We saw like 10 comments about 10 different things. So how do you pick out the trends out of that? How do you know what something, when something is a common sentiment shared among a lot of people? And how do you know when it's just like the opinion of one or two respondents? Like how do you figure that out? So we thought about this for like a day or two. Obviously we were trying to turn this around really quickly. This was before the holidays last year. And we went through interview data, didn't find a lot, like we were stuck. And finally we were like, all right, we have to get more data. So we sent out a really short survey. We selected users who had sent an A/B test campaign in MailChimp within the last like 6 or 8 months. And we asked them these questions. Okay, so what are you testing? And we asked them things like, are you testing from name, subject line, content? And we made sure to include in that question things that we didn't automatically allow people to test in MailChimp, like content, for instance. In order to test content, you'd have to like duplicate, you'd have to replicate a campaign and change it and then send it out. You'd have to do it yourself. And so we were curious to figure out who was trying to come up with interesting ways to test things and who was just using A/B testing out of the box. Which brings us to the second question of how do you test? So are you using MailChimp's A/B test tool, or are you just kind of hacking something together yourself? What's going on there? And then finally, why do you test? This was just, we were curious. And of course, as you might expect, most people were testing just because they wanted to learn how to engage their subscribers more. They wanted to understand more about their user base. And we saw the word learn come up a lot. So these people who are testing are looking for more information, obviously. And then finally, we threw in a question at the end. How could we improve email testing in MailChimp for you? And we got a lot of good feedback about this. People had lots of ideas. We saw a lot of the same ideas come up repeatedly. So we were like, okay, this is good. Like, these are things that people are doing that we could build into MailChimp that would be really helpful for them. So we got this lovely A/B testing customer segment. And similarly to the reporting segment, we have an average and median list size. We've started to understand more about like what industries are going to use this tool. Again, back to account activity, same kind of thing, noticing similarities between accounts in this group versus the reporting group. So this is great. We were super excited. This is amazing. But, so what people say they want and what people actually want are two really different things. And we know from neuroscience research that people are actually really terrible at articulating what they want. So aspirational questions like that one, how could we improve, can be really dangerous. So like if you come in and you say, hey Emily, what do you want for dinner tonight? And I'm like, oh hey, I think I'll have a salad, like mixed greens with dried cranberries or whatever that is. I'll have a salad, that sounds fantastic. That serves two purposes. Makes me feel good about myself because I'm being healthy, that's awesome, I'm doing something good. But it also communicates to you that I'm making a healthy choice, so you associate me with healthy behavior and maybe you think I'm a healthy person. But in reality, if you walked in and you sat this down in front of me, I really wouldn't be upset about it. I'd be like, yes, you read my mind, that is totally what I wanted. So this is hard, right? Like you asked me flat out what I wanted and I said the salad, but really I wanted this. So how do you figure out what people actually want? How do I get to that like research equivalent of pizza? And this was something that required a good bit of creativity for us. So we went back to these data sources that I mentioned earlier. And remember how I said, hey, that exit survey is really cool, I'll come back to that? This is where this came in handy. We realized we were gonna have to figure out how to estimate demand somehow, and we used this survey data to do it. So again, anytime somebody closes an account, we have them complete this short survey. This is so valuable because it helps us understand what causes somebody to reconsider using MailChimp and then actually do something about it. So you're not just venting to us and saying, man, I really wish you guys would change this, or I really wish this were different. These are people who left because of it. These are people who were like, no, I really need this, I'm gonna go. So again, these questions, why are you closing your account and how could we improve? So this allowed us to create this kind of, think about it as a demand curve. So up here, you can see these are people who made those requests earlier, like in those customer segments, who said, I really want this feature. I really want this thing. So that was like, I don't know, 70%, and this is mocked up data, but this is like 70% of folks who said, I want this thing, build this thing. And then you have like 10% who like would actually leave to go get it. So this is a little bit tricky, right? So if you want to think of this like in terms of demand, you can think of this as like your upper bound on demand, like the max number of users who are going to adopt this product. And then there at the bottom, you can think about that as like maybe the minimum, like at least this many people, or at least this percentage of users will convert and get this product. So yeah, that's a lot of room. Like that's a lot of space in between those two bars. So that turned out to be kind of a good thing because it gave us a way to play around and experiment with price. And that's also an important consideration, right? So how much are people going to pay for these advanced features? And this is really scary. Like this is super easy to screw up. Anybody who's done any sort of pricing research knows like this is not an easy thing. You price something too high, nobody's going to buy it even if they want it. If you price it too low, you're going to lose revenue. And maybe like you might even communicate that the product isn't worth that much if you price it too low. If you think about like value-based versus cost-based pricing. So this was a little bit scary because we didn't know what data to use for this. And again, I go back to the exit survey. We reviewed responses from the same group that matched our target customer segments. So remember how I said like these people had some really common account details. Like they all had pretty large lists. They were paying us a certain amount. They were sending a certain number of campaigns. So we took all of that, like all of that descriptive information, and we looked for users who responded to the exit survey. And we looked for people who had similar account information so that we could kind of get an idea that maybe these were analogous. These were similar types of customers, right? So we looked for responses of that customer group that mentioned the service a user was planning to switch to. And then we use their list size, because email service providers typically charge by list size. We used their list size to estimate what they were going to be paying with the new service. We were able to calculate the % difference between what they paid us and what they went to a competitor and paid. This was shocking to me. People were willing to leave MailChimp and pay, on average, 8 times more to another company, to another provider, to get this functionality. So this was bizarre to me. Like, I remember sitting at my desk and doing this, and I remember like doing it 3 times because I was like, there's no way this is right. This doesn't make any sense. But it does make sense, actually, because these are people who wanted this set of features. They could and they would pay to get that functionality. So now that we know this, and we know that people aren't limited by like they can't pay, they have to have the right incentive to do it. Then we started playing around with pricing, and here's what we came up with. So this is a version of a pricing calculator we created. And I'm not going to get super into it, but just a couple of things to note. So this is actually what you can't really see that. Okay. So up here you can see this is like our lower bound, right? So this is the number or the percentage of people who want these features based on leaving. And then right below that, so it's like 3%. So this, and then below that you see people who want features based on requests. So these are the folks who said, I really want this thing. This is our upper bound, remember that giant bar, and that's at 50. And then we came up with just kind of just a spitball, like let's throw it out at 200 and see what happens. And then we took the different monthly payment buckets we had, and we looked at the number of customers in each of those buckets, calculated an upper and lower bound, got a demand estimate, and it's not on here, but we were able to come up with a monthly revenue estimation through this. And we actually landed, surprisingly enough, I guess, at $200. This is the sweet spot for us. We realized that this was a price that was affordable for most people who really wanted these features, but it also communicated the fact that there's value to this, that this is worth that $200. So, all right, these are the questions we tackled during all of this. So what features can we build for customers? What's the actual demand for those features? And what are those customers willing to pay for those features? So we spent about 2 months on just the research portion of this. I think this whole thing stretched probably about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years. So we had these answers and we felt really good about them. We had the $200 and we said, people want reporting and they want advanced A/B testing. These are the things that customers are asking for. This is what we can build for those people who say they've outgrown MailChimp. And we shared this information with the executives, with the product team, and here's where we landed. MailChimp Pro came out about a month ago, and it is a set of advanced analytic tools for growing businesses. So these tools are built for users who really want to optimize their email marketing. They want to be strategic. They want to take it to the next level. And these are customers who historically have pushed boundaries in MailChimp. They're the ones who found hacky, interesting ways to do things. They're the ones who, when we look at their account, would be like, what are you doing? And we'd call them and talk to them and we'd be like, whoa, wow, that's super creative that you figured out a way to do that. So this is for them. And just to share some of the things that made it into MailChimp Pro, multivariate testing. So this is like A/B testing on steroids. Instead of testing an A version and a B version, you can test up to 8 combinations of variates, including subject line, from name, send time, and also content. Content was a really big one that people wanted. Subject line's always been the most popular, and it still is, but content is not far behind. So people are really already using this content testing tool. Another thing we built was comparative reports. So this is made for users who historically have exported all of their reports out of MailChimp, and they've aggregated all the data in Excel themselves. Because there were so many interviews that we went on where people would be like, here, let me show you my Excel sheet. And it's like this crazy dashboard thing that they've built themselves with report exports from MailChimp. Well, now they don't have to do that. Now the app does the heavy lifting for them. So it's like a complete step removed out of their day they don't have to deal with. And what do we price it? MailChimp Pro is whatever your normal monthly plan is. If you pay us $50 a month, Add that to $199, and that is a pro cost. So I walked through all of these things to share with you that all of these decisions we made, they were all driven by data. And not in maybe like the data-driven sense that a lot of people talk about, but in the sense that there's data to back up all of these decisions. We got creative, we found some different ways to look at it. But this is something that you can also do, right? So like, what now? So for us, our plan, we just want to keep listening. We want to keep finding out what users really need. If more people are feeling like they're outgrowing us, we want to continue to build things for these folks. But what now for you? So I hope that like this makes you want to think about the data that you have and how you can use it. For those of you who have access to research teams or are researchers, talk to other researchers. This is so valuable, especially talk to ones who are not doing the type of research you're doing. So if you're doing surveys, talk to somebody who's doing like heavy analysis or vice versa. Because I guarantee you, you're each gonna provide a lot of valuable feedback for the other and a lot of information that you didn't already have. I can't emphasize that enough. That conversation is so critical. Even if you're not in a research role, just be curious, ask questions, think about why people are doing what they're doing, think about the psychology behind it. And like I said, yeah, if you have a research team, if you're around those folks, talk to them, because I guarantee you they'll get interesting information from you. So that's all I have. And I think there's actually like plenty of time for questions, so if anyone has any.
What kind of adoption rate did y'all see with MailChimp Pro from, thinking of all the users that said they wanted it? Do you have a sense of how many jumped on that bandwagon?
Yeah, so we've been tracking that. I can't give you exact figures, but we're really happy with the way it's taken off. I'll say that. We're not disappointed. Yeah, people seem pretty excited about it. And what's more interesting actually to me is seeing what people are already doing with it. So like I look at usage statistics every week and like the types of multivariate campaigns that get sent out. There's one person that sent out like 480 multivariate campaigns. Just like everything he does is a multivariate campaign, like everything he tests everything. But so people are already starting to figure out interesting ways to do stuff. So yeah, so that's the cool part to me. Like the people that are getting it are actually using it. Yeah.
When you're talking about the findings of your research to people outside of your organization, do you find most often you're just giving the prescriptives of what you found, or do you have to show them visuals or take them through the entire process in order for them to believe what you found?
When you say outside of my organization, do you mean outside my team? So it really depends on the team, right? Like if we're communicating with executives, they typically, like, not to use the term, but like the executive summary, like they typically just want to know, okay, what are we doing? Because they trust us enough that they know that we've got the data to back it up if they want to see it. But they typically are not the folks who want to see it. Usually, what we'll try to do to keep from overwhelming people is just share a brief summary, like a paragraph, a couple bullet points, and then link to documents outside of that if they want to go look them up. But the key really is like to get people to read your research, right? Like it's useless if it sits in a folder and no one does anything with it. So our goal is to keep it really digestible. Sometimes that includes like charts and graphs, kind of things like I showed you today. That sort of stuff is helpful, but definitely not anything to overwhelm folks, if that makes sense.
Do you find that when you ask people to take an onboarding survey or an exit survey or reach out to them in general, do you have a good response rate? They can obviously ignore your survey request, correct?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And we never want to like pester people who don't want to answer questions. But yeah, we typically we do get a pretty good response rate. Like I think for our last annual survey last year, I think we had 18,000. So people usually will be cool with answering questions. And a lot of that goes to like survey design as well, like making sure that they're short and sweet and to the point, making sure that you're not overwhelming. I keep going back to overwhelming, but like there's this whole idea of like cognitive load, right? Like you don't want to put too much on someone's plate. You don't want to ask them too many things or ask them to process too much stuff because it's just not that they can't, but it's just like it becomes less appealing. So yeah, we typically have a pretty good response rate.
And you can also call them and request a phone interview, or Do you
Yeah.
find that people are receptive to that? I mean, I'm sure some people are very receptive to that if they
Yeah.
have something they wanted to tell you.
Yeah, some people are definitely super receptive to it. On a lot of our surveys, and I didn't mention this, but a lot of them also include, at the end, right after that, is there anything else you want to tell us? There's also a question of, if you'd be willing to chat with us for a bit or answer a few more questions, could you just provide your email? And so we don't ever contact anyone who doesn't provide their email. Right. Yeah.
And when you interview people and do more of the qualitative stuff, are they always MailChimp users? Or you talked about you sometimes go out and...
That's a really good question. Mostly, yes. I actually am not usually one going out and doing interviews. I will say, probably the one case I can think of where we're not doing that is in the case of switch interviews. So someone who's recently left us, and we're just curious, like, hey, what happened? Like, where did we go wrong? How could we have avoided that? So then they won't be MailChimp users anymore, but they had been.
Okay, that gets to my question. So you interview people after they leave, or do you?
Yeah. So the switch interview is like, we want to figure out why they said this.
So they're pretty okay. People will actually respond to you.
Yeah, people are surprisingly willing to share that kind of experience. Mostly because I think they understand that, or at least I hope they do, that we're not trying to heckle you. Like, we make sure that we're really clear, like, we're just curious. Like, we just want to make this better. We're not trying to, like, woo you back or anything like that. Like, you do what you have to do, but we're just curious. And so we try and set up even, like, the email invite. Like, hey, we're just really curious about this. Like, we try to frame it like that. It can be both. Most of the ones I've sat in on have been remote just because they've been all over the place, like different locations, but sure. That's all right, bring it on.
When someone leaves, you have, like, say you said less than 30 days, you're going to give them some entry survey, which...
You mean when they join?
Yes, and then at the exit, like, at what point do you actually give them is it like, I quit, give me a survey, or you wait a day, or do you bug them later? How does that?
We try to do it pretty quickly. Right now, I think it's actually been moved into the app. So as you're closing, it's just like a quick, hey, what happened? Okay, done. Like, because again, like, even though they're leaving, we still don't want to disrupt the user experience. Like, we don't want to mess with that. So it's in there, because we also find that, like, the sooner you ask people, the more fresh those opinions and impressions are. Like, so the sooner you can get that information, the better, for sure. Same thing with switch interviews. Like, if somebody switched like a year ago, it's not going to be that useful. Like, it's going to be, yeah. Right. Right. Exactly. And they're remembering, like, the last time they remembered it, and it's a mess. Yeah. For surveys or for interviews? For surveys, usually not. We'll occasionally send out, like, a random set of, like, t-shirts or MailChimp swag to folks for responding to surveys. But as far as, like, usability tests, when we do those, we'll give out Amazon gift cards for folks who come in. We definitely do compensate people. But then we also want to be careful not to, like, unfairly influence someone to come in that didn't want to, so there's that whole, like, that whole ethical issue too. So, but yeah, we typically go to. What's that? Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What if you're not an online service? So we sell tools, like physical products to people that, it's not like MailChimp, they're probably going to have like a daily email or weekly email. So you kind of know, well, plus they're going to close their account. So you have an instant, okay, they close the account, they get the exit survey, and then you can ask them to do the qualitative exit survey, exit interview. What recommendations would you have for someone who has customers that buy actual products? At some point, we don't, when do you decide, oh, they're not a customer anymore? How long do you think?
Do you all do anything like, do you track the last time someone's purchased from you? So maybe it's setting up a metric like that. Like, the last time this person purchased from me was 6 months ago, and maybe before that they'd purchase once a month, for 10 months. I don't know. So maybe it's something like that, where you'd notice this drop in engagement.
Okay, so maybe like at the individual customer level, based on their own order history, what's that metric, and maybe that generates a report of, hey, maybe we should reach out to these people.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I mean, and I say 6 months. Just I kind of threw that out arbitrarily. It just depends on your business model, like how frequently. Like if you're selling something that's like a consumable product, consumable, or I can't think of the actual word. Replenishable. That's it. Sorry. I worked in a lab and we called them consumables, and that's in my head. But if you're selling something like that, then maybe you want to follow up after like a month of no order. But for different types of things, maybe it's like 3 months, 6 months. And then you can just kind of look at those groups as cohorts and see, like, maybe you want to send them an email, maybe you want to give them a phone call, however you best contact them. Yeah.
And have you done any research with, I don't know if you have international customers that speak languages other than English. How do you fit them into your model if you don't speak their language?
Right. So we actually find that a lot of folks do speak English. A lot of folks who use MailChimp speak English because it is an app totally in English. And it's just recently that we've had the KD translated into a couple of different languages. So typically folks are pretty proficient. They're proficient enough to either speak with us or email back and forth with us. So it doesn't present a lot of problems on that front necessarily. But we do think a lot about like localization, translation, those sorts of things. But as far as user research specifically, I'd say most of the folks who are willing to respond to us, there's that kind of selection. Like they feel comfortable enough with their English that they'll respond to us. So there's some sort of selection bias there as well. But right. And we have a couple of different like multilingual people on the team and in the company, so that helps too. Like if we get somebody we really need to talk to, like, look, man, can you please come speak Portuguese to this guy because I don't know Portuguese, that's helpful. So, yeah.
So MailChimp's like most people, email marketing, it's kind of a positive thing. Definitely MailChimp is like a positive experience for people. So they come on, they might not be that happy with their experience, but they probably have some sort of, happiness to associate with this, so they're willing to leave that feedback. What kind of suggestions do you have where it's something like paying a healthcare bill? Like it's just a really negative experience, regardless of how well your product works, in getting that feedback from people who are actually really happy about it.
Yeah. Who are happy to give the feedback, you mean? Yeah, that's tough. I think approach is really important, which obviously I'm sure that's not something you've not thought about. You're like, obviously it's important. But I think a lot of people who, even though that is maybe an unpleasant experience, and this is completely anecdotal, but when I receive surveys or requests for feedback from services that I don't particularly enjoy, I want to share that with them, but I want to be constructive about it. So I think it's a matter of just trying to get that feedback. I mean, you'll probably get some negative, not so helpful, like all caps, shouting kind of stuff. But then the ones that you do get will be really useful. And maybe if that's been done through a survey, maybe then you can follow up with them and say, hey, thank you so much for doing this. Could we talk to you a little more? That's a tougher market for sure. I'm sorry I don't have any better ideas. But yeah, it's a challenge.
You mentioned you do SQL queries and you do coding. Do you do that in R? And what other tools do you use for data analysis?
Yeah, so it's funny. A lot of people, we have a split, like a house divided. So a couple of folks on our team use R, a couple of folks use Python. I use Python just because it's something I started with, and I'm comfortable with R, but I feel more like I'm stumbling around in it. But yeah, so Python, R, SQL. Those are all things that we use pretty regularly. Quite honestly though, never underestimate the power of just a spreadsheet. Until the data gets too big to fit in there, just use that. It's so helpful, and that's what I find myself going back to it over and over because it's just this is really great. This is perfect. But yeah, so there's a variety of tools. And one thing I'll say is that I know a lot of companies are specific about we want you to know this and that and this and that. We don't really care. Just be able to do the work. Just do the thing. We don't care how you did it, as long as you did it right. So, does that answer your question? It is awesome. It took me 2 months to figure out where all of the coffee makers were. So that was a little weird. No, it's really awesome. It's a very nice space, nice open space. Well, now we're sitting next to different people, so now there's that whole proximity thing where now I know you because you sit next to me, and I like you because you sit next to me. So there's that whole thing at play. So it's interesting. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's it. That's the sign. Yeah, in the window. Yes.
How do you interact with the UX and the more, I guess, the designers of the product as opposed to like your research side that's pushing the, getting the information, and then they're saying, oh, we're making these decisions, let's do this. How does that work?
Historically, it hasn't always been the cleanest process. Because I think I mentioned this earlier, but the importance of sharing your research and how you do it, it's hard. And especially for like our company, because we have grown so rapidly, it's been really hard to figure out like processes to share that stuff. So at this point, really what we're doing is we have a couple people from the UX research team, so like the qualitative researchers, they'll go and sit in on those meetings with the product team or with the mobile designers. And they'll be there to like share information, give feedback. So it really helps just having people like sitting in on meetings and making sure that we're sharing that the documentation, anything we write up, interview notes.
Do you share, maybe I missed this, I apologize.
No, it's okay. I might not have been clear.
Because, I just did a few usability tests like a week ago, and it was in Excel or Google spreadsheet. It's a few tabs. I basically just hit chat to everybody and said, here.
Yeah.
And, the findings were on the first tab so you could see it, but then they can dig around. That's pretty much all I do.
Yeah.
I don't do a meeting and then say, okay, partly it's our structure and how fast we're moving. But do you have let's do a meeting. This is important. We need to talk about this. And then, or like a lunch and learn so that everyone's there. That way, how to get people to watch users use a product, sometimes you do it at lunch. That way, kind of thing.
Yeah, so we have done that in the past. It also depends on the scale of the research that we want to communicate. So like, excuse me, we recently redesigned our our like tablet sign-up form, Chimpity-Doo. Now it's called MailChimp Subscribe. And when we were doing usability tests for those, like that app was getting rebuilt from the ground up. So it was really important that everyone on the mobile design team saw that information. So I think we actually did set up a meeting at one point to talk to them about it. But for other things, just general usability or other smaller projects, yeah, it's informal. Like we still will just throw it in a Google Doc and be like, here guys, take a look at this when you have a chance. So again, it really depends on the scale of the project, I'd say. But yeah, we definitely do a lot of informal sharing. Just kind of passing to like, here's all the data in a Google Doc and a Google Sheet. Take a look, let me know if you have questions. So.
Do you find that you get less pushback because it's quantitative as opposed to qualitative? Have you ever seen that interaction? Do you know?
I do know what you're talking about. I'm trying to think specifically like where I am now if I've seen that. I actually have never seen that in person at MailChimp. Because the UX department, the UX research department has been around for, that's been a thing for so long there, and that's sort of like, UX is what we're about. I think people really value the qualitative information. And it's so amazing because they'll share stuff and people will stop by, developers and designers and this is great, I feel like I learned something new every time I talk to you all. Whereas with us, it's oh cool, that's charts. Great, that's nice. So it's kind of almost like the reverse. It's oh, that's interesting, okay, all right. You got any more of them interviews? Because those are good, those are really interesting. So.
Where people question, if they don't agree with it, it's confirmation bias.
Right.
And basically, if you agree with the findings, you'll be like, oh, I knew it.
Right.
But if you don't, you start to pick at it and chip away until you try to find something wrong. It's well, are you sure?
Right.
Because you just don't believe it,
Right.
Because sometimes it's really a shock to people to see something.
Oh yeah, especially when you do screen recordings and things like that. People are like, well, no, there's no way. Well, it's right here. I don't know what else to show you. It's right here on the screen. So yeah, and to combat that, I think that, what is the rule? It's 10 interviews, and that's when you get your good amount. Okay, I'm seeing head nods. That's right. So 10 interviews, and if you start to see patterns over those 10, that you should feel pretty good about that, and you need to dig into it further. And I think there's kind of an understanding that that's sort of how it works. Most people are willing to go, you all are good enough at your jobs, and you're experts enough in this field that we'll put some stock in what you say. So that's pretty nice. Yeah.
Do you ever verify qualitative versus quantitative and vice versa?
What was the first part of the question? I'm sorry. Yes. So it's really interesting you bring that up. About 2 months ago, so we have a team that's building another product elsewhere in the company, and they had asked us to do some customer research for them. They'd like me to do some quantitative customer research for them, and they were curious about like the types of users who were going to be using this product. They wanted to know like, what can we find out about them? What do they need? Who are they? And how can we find them like outside of MailChimp? And so I did all of this quantitative analysis. Like I did a lot of digging in our database. I did a lot of looking at like how these customers compare to these and like all of this analysis, right? And I remember going into the meeting with like the director of new product. And I remember sitting down and walking him through this presentation, feeling so awesome. I was like, this is great. Like we've nailed it. I have a plan to get more data. I know what we're going to do. Like I know how we're going to find these folks elsewhere or like outside of MailChimp. And at the end of the presentation, he just kind of looked at me and goes, "Oh, okay, good. Well, that's what we thought." And I was like, wait, what? He and his team had been doing a lot of interviews and visits. And essentially everything I told him, they had learned and come to on their own, completely separately. We had never talked about it. They had the exact same like customer profile built that I did. So it's amazing to see that play out. And I think it takes a lot of, like you have to have people who know where to look for that information. But yeah, and that was sort of accidental. I say accidental, that wasn't like a planned validation. But yeah, a lot of times like people will come back from interviews and say, hey, like all 7 of those people said they do this. Can you find other users in our database who do this? So there's this sense of like going back to look for it or trying to figure out how much we can verify.
Yeah, but I was thinking more from a verification of, so imagine you conduct user testing, you find 2 things, but those 2 people, you're not going to base all your life on 2 people response, right?
Right.
But then do you ever conduct, let us say, intercept surveys, asking the same question to say, I wonder if the visitors to my website or the users of my products are feeling this thing, or vice versa. You find something in the intercept survey that you ask, want to dive deeper in, then you go kind of user testing for those.
I see what, okay, I'm sorry, I think I misunderstood your question. I see what you're saying. Yes, so that is always a problem. Like the sample size issue is always something that comes up, and like we're very aware of the fact that like 2 or 3 user tests does not like an entire customer population make. So yeah, when we start to see things like that, granted, if you see it with a couple of customers, like there's a chance that you're onto something. But yes, we will send out surveys and we will ask people, talk about this. How do you do this thing? You know, just to hear it in their own words, just to make sure that we're on the right track. So yes, we do that. Yeah.
Any other questions? All right.
Well, awesome. Well, like I said, well, my Twitter is not up there anymore, but it's at MLEAustin, so please feel free to get in touch, or if you have other questions, I'm happy to stick around and chat. So thank you all so much for coming. This is awesome. I hope you got something out of it.